Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Brad from Headbangers Podcast. Today we have Tommy from Sovereign. If you don't know Sovereign, they've released an incredible death thrash album that's just released in January. So already kicking off the year with an incredible album. It features sci-fi horror themes with as well as, a lot of the likes of Pestilence, Sepultura, Nocturnus influence music, incredible production. Yeah, so we have a great conversation. We talk about everything from sci-fi horror movies to producing the album, the kind of lyrical themes that come along with it, as well as just nerding out about a bunch of stuff. But yeah, it's been incredible. If you like the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you are listening on streaming services, don't forget to give us a rating. Just help us out in the algorithm. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome back to the Headbangers Podcast. I'm your host, Brad. Fortunately, Nathan can't be here today. But we're here with Tommy from Sovereign. How are you doing, man, to start off with?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing good, thank you. So one of the way that we always like to start on this podcast is what's your funniest gig or tour story that you can recall?
Oh man, you're trying to get me into trouble right away now, aren't you?
Don't spare
Uh,
the juicy stuff.
I'll try to keep it PG-13, I think. So I don't want to say anything that's going to get me into trouble later on. So I actually got this one story with I play live guitar for Necromantheon, which is this other thrash band from Norway. And we were playing this great festival in East Germany called Chaos Descends. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a pretty cool
I
festival.
don't think so.
Yeah, it's a great festival, like all good stuff about it. But we were playing there in summer 2022, I think it was. And when we got there, we came by car, and then we were told we had to just like wait a bit because there were some problems in the campsite. So this is like this old kind of like think it's like an old like East German like summer camp for kids, basically this whole area where it's at. And so they had some problem with some gypsies that had taken over this whole place. And the problem was basically that they were struggling to get them out of there because the way they would kind of mark their territory was to like just shit everywhere.
What the
Yeah,
fuck?
yeah, I know, like yeah, actual human shit. And
No way.
while we were there for the whole festival, there's just like this small, like, it's just kind of this called it just like the crispy train. It's like this train for kids that goes around the whole campsite. And they thought they got rid of all these gypsies, but we were taking this train around, and you would see all these gypsies just like sitting around in bushes, taking shits everywhere. I was kind of just like it was just like the weirdest experience ever. Like it was this whole metal festival thing going on, and there's like gypsies pissing and taking shits everywhere. That was kind of weird. Definitely
That's
the
definitely
weirdest tour story.
It's funny because we say this all the time, but like a lot of these tour stories that we've heard, there's always a common theme of shits in some way. It always
Yeah,
finds its way back in. But you've managed to bring the most unique one, to be honest. I've never heard that before.
yeah, it was a weird one for sure. Yeah,
It's like that thing going on in France, of like, they're like throwing all the feces at like the parliament and stuff. It's crazy.
yeah. There's
It's
something
a little
about the
fun.
feces and shits. I don't know. There's something about it.
So like was all that going on in the same area then? So there was the festival, there's the kids camp, and then there's just like
Yeah.
gypsies as well.
So basically, like the kids' camp or like the buildings around the campsite was kind of where all the bands were staying. So most people would like camp in tents, whatever, like usually do at like summer festivals or open air festivals. But so the problem was really in like the buildings where like all the bands were supposed to stay. Like some gypsies had just like completely taken over and was like refusing to leave. And when they were trying to force them out, like for 2 weeks prior to the festival, like they were just like shit everywhere. And then they would just like move into the woods, and this train would like go around the woods around the campsite, and then you would just see them every now and then, like getting their pants down and taking shits around the bushes. It's a weird experience for sure, but kind of
Fucking
funny
hell,
too.
man, yeah. Definitely one to remember, I imagine. Must have stunk at that
Yeah,
festival for sure.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, obviously we have to get into all the realities.
Yeah.
It's barely into the new year and you guys have set the bar so high, like out of nowhere. Just every track was immense, like it's incredible. I want to ask like what shapes your guitar style because when I listen to this album, like I can hear bits of Sepultura, Pestilence, like Atheist, like there's so much going on there. What would you say? shaped your style personally?
Yeah, it's definitely all of those bands you mentioned there. It's I think it's well, the thing is, like with Sovereign, this is like a fairly new band, but we're all like quite experienced musicians. I would say we've all played in different bands over the years, and we're older. We're not that young. Like I'm the youngest, and I'm almost 31 now. So it's definitely like it feels uh, like personally, I've had definitely all the bands you mentioned, but also like different like Cynic, Sadistic Intent, all these different bands, like the more like darker, heavy death thrash of like the late '80s, early '90s. But we've spent a long time writing this album, trying to like just take what we find to be the best parts of all those bands and try to create our own sound. At the same time, try to keep this more like Norwegian production of it, which has definitely become a thing over the past like 10, 15 years, I would say, for the thrash style. Uh, and um, and just try to like do our own thing in Norway. I would say like for the thrash bands, and there's so many great ones. To do the more like kind of progressive technical stuff is not very common. So we try to. I think main idea I would say is try to do the more progressive death thrash, almost the proto death of the late '80s,
Yeah.
mixed with the more like Norwegian kind of style. I would say in a way, like we love like Obliteration, one of our favorite bands from Norway. So to try to like take some of that, but then mix it with all these kind of more, yeah, definitely like the style in between like late '80s, early '90s when there were like it was like really aggressive thrash metal was kind of going into death metal, but at the same time quite technical. So like there's so many bands around that area that we all love. So just try to take the best, our favorite parts of all those bands and try to create our own sound, I would say is probably what we've been trying to do at least.
Yeah, there's a lot that I definitely want to unpack with it. I mean, from what you said before, like, it's a debut album. You obviously, I could sense when I listened to it, I was like, this can't be a debut album. This is way too professional and like, there's so much going on. So I guess because you guys have played in bands, that makes like more sense. But it's super
Mm,
impressive though, even like for that, just like, debut establishing album of a band, like, because I'll be honest, like, I've really fallen off the wagon with thrash in a way. Like, I love the
mm,
80s stuff. I've loved like, the revival in the 2000s, but like recently I've just found it hard to like find thrash that I enjoy that doesn't feel like it's copying something else. And then
yeah,
you guys and like High Command and stuff like really got my love for thrash again, which is super cool. So yeah, it's
yeah.
it's such an impressive debut album, man. Like props to you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. Thanks, man. That's good to hear. It's yeah, we're definitely trying to I don't know. I agree with everything you're saying. Like, there's a lot of, and I've been a thrash metal fan since for as long as I can remember, really. From I remember like seeing we had. Did you have Headbangers Ball on MTV in the UK as well when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think we had MTV, yeah, so I think Headbangers Ball was on there, but I'm 26, so I think like
Ah, you're too young.
yeah, I was too young. I don't remember that
But,
being on. I was a bit of a late bloomer in metal.
yeah, because I grew up on like the west coast of Norway in a city called Stavanger, and this was like this is definitely not a thing. Like no one listened to thrash metal like early 2000s in Stavanger. That was not a thing. So my kind of input would be they would have at 11 p.m. on every Sunday they would have like Norwegian Headbangers Ball. And I remember seeing there's this guy called Pete Evil who plays in a band called Blood Tsunami from Norway, like a thrash band from like a couple of years back, and I remember seeing like Over the Wall by Testament, the music video, when I was about maybe 8, 9, 10 years old. And that just like changed everything for me. It was like, so I've always been obsessed, ever since then, I've been obsessed with that kind of late 80s style. And that it's not just the music, it's the whole style as well. You know how it is. It's like, it's definitely like I was wanted to have curly hair, got curly hair, and tight trousers and denim, leather, all that stuff. So I was
High
kind of been
tops,
obsessed
style
with that my
jacket.
whole high tops for sure, and so kind of been obsessed with that my whole life. But it was kind of, and I actually lived in the UK for about 2 or 3 years, 10 years ago. I lived
Oh,
in London.
amazing.
Yeah, and it was that was actually kind of I was introduced to a lot of like the UK thrash scene around that time, and I did some live guitar for Virus, this old UK thrash band, when I was living there. But I get introduced to like DAM and like Annihilated. Do you know those? and
I think I'm too familiar now.
yeah, and you had like Lawnmower Death,
Yeah, I'm
right? And
familiar with them.
Eccentrics, Acid Rain, these different
Yeah, heard
UK
all of
thrash
them.
bands from like late 80s. Yeah. And that's a very different style of thrash, though. But I quite enjoyed that back then too. But I don't know. It's like when I moved to Oslo after that. That's kind of where I met all these because that already back then, like 10 years ago, it was a great thrash scene in Norway. It's been around for a long time now, I would say. And I'm quite like proud to be a part of that scene because I definitely feel like the Norwegian thrash scene has its own sound. There's like a lot of great bands from like Deathhammer, Necromantheon, and Culture, Condor 10 years ago. Great stuff. So
Yeah, I want to unpack that a bit because, like,
mm,
Norwegian like thrash metal, it's not something that you hear about as much. Like, because obviously, I feel like it might be overshadowed by like Norwegian black metal and
yeah.
Norwegian death metal as well. So,
Mm.
I think, do you think it's like a bit of a slept on like amazing part of like Norway's music is like the thrash metal side?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's and it all goes back to like you had this band in the '90s that would like mix black metal and thrash metal, like Or Noir, probably one of the best bands from Norway ever. And they would take like they would definitely would say probably the first to kind of merge that Norwegian metal sound with thrash metal, which is like a colder, more evil, very aggressive style of thrash metal. And ever since then, it's kind of been there. There's been bands like Audio Pain came out in early 2000s, also a great band. And like since 2005, you've had Deathhammer and Necromantia. It's been around for a long time. And I feel like it's, in a way, it's probably like a slept-on style, but at the same time, it definitely has its place. It's kind of like an established scene in many ways, I would say. It's because it is in some way you have that Norwegian sound to it. That very
Yeah,
cold, dark sound is a very. I don't know if it's like because it's not black metal in any way, but it still has the kind of the same aura about it, the same
the
sound to it.
atmosphere. Yeah.
Yeah, the atmosphere for sure. And like I've been fortunate enough to play with Necromantia now for about 3 years, just doing live guitars, and like we've been like all over the world really to play Norwegian thrash metal. We were in Japan last year. We're going to Mexico next
Oh,
week.
amazing, man.
We've been to the US. So it's definitely like, but it's still like it's so underground, like most extreme metal is. But it's definitely like it's definitely I would say it's an established scene. And in Norway, it's getting quite big now, and there's probably more of the death metal happening nowadays, though. So there's a lot of death metal bands coming out of Norway.
Definitely. So like obviously you guys started Sovereign. Was that like because obviously you were playing in a couple of bands as well. Like what made
Mm.
you want to start Sovereign then? Was it like a because obviously you got the progressive sounds with Sovereign, like maybe something that you were missing from some of the other ones? Like what made you want to start up Sovereign? Do you just want to
Yeah,
try something different?
yeah, for sure, absolutely. It was a couple years back. I was playing in a different band with Seaman, who plays bass and sings in Sovereign. And we were talking about like wanting to do like a side project at first, wanting to because I've been like dying to do like more death thrash kind of music for ages now. Never really had the opportunity to do it, and he was very keen on the idea. So me and him just started out. His initially it was him just playing guitar and me playing guitar, and then we found out it was better for him to do a bass and vocals because he's got pretty sick vocals, and then we kind of quickly found out it was going to be hard to do what we want to do on guitar and him also to do the style of vocal we wanted to do. So we got in Vida on guitar, who's played with Simon for years. And to begin with, we kind of started out as more of a black thrash band in the vein of Or Noir, because one of my
Yeah.
favorite bands from Norway ever. That we did like one single, like 6 years ago, which was definitely more like Or Noir, black thrash, a lot of one string stuff. And then kind of like the more me and Simon were writing riffs and working on it, it just became more of the kind of a mix of like the European death metal of the late 80s, like the very like the Pestilence stuff with more of the Nocturnus of the US, kind of a bit of like the Florida scene. And then we would get like start listening to like Status and these kind of bands, and then it was just like, and we kind of felt like we had the capabilities to do this kind of music, and that's kind of what we want to do, like to really challenge ourselves in compositions and try to make something that's different to our native country, at least. Just not a lot of bands do that here. But then again, try to keep a bit of that Norwegian feel about it. But it's I don't know, the more we work, the more kind of progressive it became. But we've always had, and we're still going to keep doing this for the next album for sure, which is we want to keep like a groove and a steady groove through the whole thing. That's kind of the clue. We want it to be progressive and technical and have a lot of time changes, a lot of like left turns that's not expected. But at the same time, try to keep the drums as like just powerful as possible. Not too many stops, not too much of the maybe atheist or early cynic stuff where it's like constant like stopping and starting. Like try to keep it flowing all the time, to
Yeah.
keep that kind of aggressive thrash metal feel to it, but at the same time let maybe the guitars do more of the progressive work, and then of course every now and then throw in some drum stuff. But we want you to still be able to just bang the shit out of our music, still listening to it, and then when you listen to it the second, third, fourth time, then you start realizing these different technical details maybe that you didn't catch the first time. That's kind of been the goal, and that will always be what we're going to try to do, just to keep you on your toes the whole time. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And well, I mean, Nathan's not here, so I can say I always like do food analogies for some reason, but like I feel with progressive elements and like, tech death and stuff and all stuff like that, I love it, don't get me wrong. But sometimes it's like having spicy food when someone makes it too spicy and you can't enjoy it. But this felt
Yeah,
like a perfect balance. It's like just enough of it. It's
yeah,
like you've still remembered to make, like you said, the grooves and like, but I've still got the riff to counter tech stuck in my head. Like
yeah.
just my favorite one from the album, and it's just such a chunky riff, and it's like, but yeah, you got the progressive elements as well, so like it keeps it interesting. So
Mm.
yeah, super important, I think.
Yeah. Cheers, man. I appreciate that. It's yeah, for sure. That's the thing. It's I think the goal me and Simon had when we were writing the album was that we never wanted two songs to sound the same. They had to be different in some way. And I think I'm quite happy with how it turned out in terms of that, because I definitely feel like no two songs are the same. Like they can be both aggressive, but the structure of the song, the way it's built up, the way like the riffs are always different. And to me, that's very important when I listen to. That could be, for example, some of the problems I can have listening to the very technical like photo death of the late 80s. It's like it can be too. It's almost too much. It's kind of it feels weird for me to say that because I've listened way too much to that kind of music, but. I never wanted to do that myself. I wanted to have like the elements of that I really like. But I don't want too much of it. And if you're going to put it in every song, it has to be spread out and done in a different way. So I could take like 5 elements of an atheist song, I think are amazing, but I will spread those 5 elements out in 5 different songs. I'll never put all of them into one. This kind of thing we've been trying to do, and definitely like try to just keep like the aggression and the adrenaline, but at the same time do stuff that people find interesting, and try to. But I think maybe the most important part is to constantly do these, like we just call it like left turns. We want to do left turns when you don't expect it. That's the most important thing. Like you're listening to it and you're almost getting into it, and then there's a left turn, but then you're getting into that, and there's another left turn. To constantly do that, to keep that, because for me as a listener, that's what keeps, especially death thrash, interesting to me. Is that's
Definitely.
what keeps you on your toes and what does it interesting. And for myself as a lead guitarist as well, I'm not a very typical like death metal lead guitarist. I try to do like semi melodic solos in a way, but not too much. It's obviously going to be a lot of shred, but at the same time try to do memorable hooks every now and then at least. Especially when you were mentioning counter tech, that's probably the solo I'm the most happy with on the album,
Yeah, this
because
that man, it's so cool.
yeah, because it's a very complicated song to play a solo of, because it's the time signature is actually quite weird and it's almost like syncopated all the time. So I tried to like to do stuff that would make it interesting and like melodic in a way, but also like a beautiful but like crazy and also dark at the same time. Try to get all that into one composition is it's something when I listen back to it now, because for a long time I didn't even listen to this fucking album because I was so sick of it. Like, couldn't stand it. But because like we recorded this album like 2 years ago almost, so it's been around for a while, for us at least. But when I listen back to it now, it's kind of happy with how that whole part turned out as well. Like we tried to do like melodic stuff when it suits the song, when it suits the composition in a way, to also do something a bit different, because that's also not very common for that style of music, at least not what I've heard, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of meticulous details going on there, and I think, like you said, it's great that you wanted to defy people's expectations of just like, okay, this is what you're going to expect. Let's do something else. Because
Mm,
again, like you said, with Thrash, sometimes you can just read what the album's going to be like from the beginning song, and it doesn't seem to change, which is
yeah,
not an issue sometimes. If you like
no,
Slayer or something, but I feel like if you're a band now, you should definitely try something new, and that's what you guys have done. I want to get
yeah,
into
yeah.
obviously the lyrical themes as well because it's super
Mm,
interesting. I read that, it's about technology, human nature, kind of I guess where that's going now.
yeah.
What initially drew you guys to these topics?
Ah, again, going back to me and Steven, we write all the lyrics together as well, same as the music. It kind of started out with like this obsession for like almost like sci-fi horror movies, like from an early age. I think I've always been obsessed with those kind of things. And But for the lyrical theme of the album, it's definitely like a dystopic kind of theme, but a lot of existentialism, human nature, definitely technology. But I think the best way for me to put it is probably like looking at the world the way we see it now, but through like a sci-fi theme. And because it sometimes feels like we're living in a sci-fi world now, especially now with technology and stuff. But most of these lyrics were written during the lockdowns of the pandemic. So it was definitely like a dark time, and a lot of it is kind of like a comment to there was this time, this almost this year of the pandemic where it felt like everything was just happening online. Everything was online because you were not meeting people, right? And it was just like such a toxic place to be. Still is, like to be
Yeah.
fair, but at the time it was just like I was like I can't even. And then me and Tim were just like talking about these different things, and like definitely like what it felt like to just live in that time, and it felt like we're just like constantly being like swallowed up by technology. That's kind of the thing, and that kind of just became the whole thing for the album. And altered realities is, I guess, is just what it felt like at the time. It felt like we were living in an altered reality because it was just like it was so obscure to be like in a pandemic, and then just having technology that made us able to communicate with everyone. And for me, it didn't feel like a lot of good things came out of that. It was quite the contrary, actually. And
Yeah, definitely.
so it just kind of just started with that, and then it just evolved into like yeah, most of it. Like when I read the lyrics back now, I can definitely tell which of the songs are older, like the opening track or the quasi title track for the album. It's definitely like that's the oldest song by far, and that's kind of at the time when we wrote the lyrics for that, it was more just I don't know, it's kind of like a comment on technology and like being I don't know, not feeling 100% at home with the way things are and the technological world we are living now. But you can definitely tell when you get further into the album towards the end, like with the last track, it's definitely dystopic in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And again, I can definitely tell that that was written at probably the height of being sick of lockdowns and being sick of being online because it's quite dark. But I feel like it's more. It's I would just say like it's kind of social commentary to like the world we live in, seeing like how we experience it, and definitely like the pandemic times, and like yeah, almost feeling like we're in some kind of 80s sci-fi movie because it doesn't feel real at times, like all the stuff you're seeing online about AI and all that shit. And it's scary.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. When I always think back to like lockdown times, it felt like, yeah, it did feel really dystopian. Like when you look back
Mm.
at it, it almost feels like it never happened, but it did.
Yeah, for sure, for
And
sure.
even though like I think everyone was like more disconnected than ever before, so it was like
Yeah,
super. it's an interesting concept based on that, and it is kind of heading in that direction anyway. You look at like
Yeah,
VR and people doing deep fakes of people, like managing to
yeah,
like rip someone's face off and put it on something else, put words behind it. You can do AI voices, chat GP. Like it's
it's crazy.
such a crazy world. If you think back like 20 years ago, that would this happen, you just wouldn't think so, or would you?
Yeah,
Something's gonna
yeah,
happen in like
no,
100 years.
exactly. And I guess I've seen some in different forums online about like it's quite common to do like AI artwork for albums now as well, isn't it? So I've heard this kind of like a lot of metal bands
Yeah,
do that. The problem is I can't tell. So that's what scares me about AI. I can tell if it's AI or not. I wouldn't know.
I think that's a good thing
Uh,
though, right?
yeah. I guess. I
I think
guess. I
it's
don't know. It just
it'd be
freaks me out.
worrying when like you can't tell the difference, I think. I think
Yeah,
what's scary as well is like, these AI generated songs, like, people like are
yeah,
doing it and loads of people think that a new track's been dropped and it just happens to be like AI. It's like I feel like there's gonna be a massive not copyright issue, but there's gonna be like, some bad shit's gonna go down with that for sure.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, that's happening. It's definitely yeah. Like I've heard like different like because I guess you could take like a famous vocalist like James Hetfield and put it through like AI, and you can do different shit that sounds like James Hetfield singing it, which is freaky. It's weird. Like I don't know. Like I've never felt as old as I do nowadays. So like with technology and stuff. Like I feel like this is what fucking dad would tell me about these different things. Where it's just like I can't keep track of everything that's going on. It definitely feels like that nowadays for me. Like, I can't keep up with this stuff. It's too much.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's like a generational thing though. It's like, every
Mm.
time something new comes along, you're like you can't believe that that's actually happened. But I
Yeah,
think but in a way, like the last 5 years I'd say have been like the most sort of transitional.
yeah,
Like this I think the whole AI thing has just come out, it seems to have come out of nowhere and then now it's just taken over everything. Like
for
video editing
sure.
with it, artwork, like it's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's crazy. Oh, it is. Yeah,
Would you
scary.
say like
That's what it is.
So you say like the lyrical theme, would you say have like a pessimistic view on technology then going forward?
Yeah. I can't deny it. It's kind of in there. So if I said something else now, that would be a bit of a lie. It's definitely yeah. We have a song called Counter Tech, so that kind of says, kind of says it all. Really, it's yeah, and yeah, and the thing is, like, it's definitely like in the album sense, it's definitely like a counter technology kind of anti technology theme to it. But that doesn't mean like we hate everything that has to do with technology. It's just like that to me and to Seaman at the time felt the most like dystopic. We wanted to write about something that was felt dystopian to us.
Yeah,
And at the time it definitely was. Like especially then like 2021 when we were 2020, 2021, we were writing a lot of the material. That was definitely the thing that would freak me out the most at the time for sure was that and like the internet in general really just like how toxic it is
definitely.
and the fact that we that's all we were doing at the time was being online. So I
So
don't know
like
if I love that.
the theme of like technology then, do you think that's going to be like a common thing for Sovereign to talk about going forward,
Yeah.
or do you think that it was just for that time period of when you're writing like what you're passionate about? Or is it
No,
just depends how you feel
I
when the next one comes?
yeah, no, I think that will definitely be that will definitely be there for the future albums for sure. I think that's the good thing about it for us. It's that like a lot of the aggression that we have in our music comes from that. So that's like kind of a theme that kind of I don't know. It wakes up something inside us that wants makes us want to create this aggressive music. So I think it kind of have to be there in some way or another in the future as well. But I definitely want to explore other themes. But one thing that we could definitely say for sure would always be about like human nature and existentialism in some way.
Yeah.
That's that I'm sure of.
I think it's got a good shelf life though, like singing about technology because so many thrash bands or like just metal bands in general have done like religion and
Hmm.
a lot of horror stuff, which I always enjoy. But I think
Yeah,
you know technology is almost the real horror because
yeah,
it's all around you and it's changing and it's scary. So I think like it's always going to have a place and there's so much you can do with it because it's such a mystery. But Yeah,
It is,
spooky at the same time.
and the good thing is, it's always something new happening. It's always something new to freak you the fuck out, right? So technology will continue to freak me out for the rest of my life, I'm sure. So there'll always be something new to write about in regards to technology, I'm sure.
Where did you guys get the name Sovereign from?
Oh, that's actually, and yeah, I know there's a tons of band called Sovereign, but it was actually when I was living in London, and there was a friend of mine called John, and we started a black metal project. And it must have been like 10, 11 years ago, and he had the name Sovereign, so I actually got to credit him for that. I always kind of liked just like the way sometimes you just like get a name, it just tastes good. Like I like the way it sounds. And when I moved back to Oslo, I actually asked him because when me and Stephen were starting out Sovereign, I asked my friend John in London, like, can I possibly just use this name because I kind of still like it. I've always had this wish to use it for something, and he was yeah, for sure. So it's actually his name, so I didn't even come up with it. But I got asked the other day as well, like if it has any like political meaning to it or something. And definitely not. It's just there's something about sovereign, like the historical meaning of the word, and like I just like how it sounds really. And it's too late to do anything about that now, so it will stay sovereign probably forever, hopefully.
Yeah, it's an interesting tie because again Nathan will probably tell me not to mention this fucking game because I've any chance to get time to bring it up because it's my favorite game of all time. But I hope you're familiar with the Mass Effect trilogy. It's
I've
basically
never, I've,
like,
ne- I've barely played a game in my life. I don't know
have
anything.
you not?
Like it. No, yeah, no,
Yeah,
no.
there's like a ship and there's like a ship in this game and it's basically like an AI controlled ship and it controls like all this like technology that's trying to threaten humanity. So it's an
Uh,
interesting tie for a name that you had no idea had that connection, but it's also
oh,
connected to
so
killer
the name of the
technology.
ship. So the name of the ship is Sovereign.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'll just use that from now on. So I'll just steal
Yeah.
that off you. If someone asks me again, I'll just use that one. Sounds much better than what I said.
I'll take it. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously you like sci-fi horror films. Do you have any hot
Mhm.
takes? Any interesting hot takes on like a certain movie? Like maybe one that you think is overrated, maybe one that you think is great, that's underrated. Any hot takes in that regard?
Yeah, the most underrated one for sure has to be Event Horizon from like 1997. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
It's
That's
on my
like
watch list. It's on my watch list for sure.
yeah. So that was kind of a flop at the time when it came out. It was kind of a big movie, I think. It was supposed to be, but it completely flopped. It's come this like underground kind of cult film. It's so dark and it's so good. So I'll just yeah. If there's any movie that if people haven't seen Event Horizon, go watch it. It's great. But for me, it's The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing is my favorite, probably one of my favorite movies of all time. I think.
I thought you
Um,
were gonna say that was your your hot
yeah.
take, like you think it's overrated. I was like, wow, that is a hot
No.
take. Wow. No, it's
No,
incredible.
I fucking love that movie. And I don't know if you know, but in the beginning of the movie, it's so funny because there's these Norwegians, right? They have this camp and then the whole. I'm not going to spoil anything, but this dog comes to this American
I remember.
site,
Yeah.
and they're speaking Norwegian. It's not fucking Norwegian, I'll tell you that. Like
I always
it's
wonder
like
this. I always wonder
yeah,
this. Like,
it's like the worst Norwegian you've ever heard. It's just like, could you just get it? Surely there was a Norwegian guy in Hollywood who could just tell you how to say these things. Because it's definitely you could definitely tell it's like some American is trying is just like reading off a script. It doesn't know how to speak Norwegian. It's
literally,
but
man.
the
That
fun but the funny thing though with it is like what he's trying to actually say is the plot of the movie. Yeah,
my
that's what he's
God.
trying to tell them. He's trying to tell them the plot of the movie in Norwegian. So it's kind of a cool little fun fact there, at least.
It's interesting. It's always like when you watch a film and it's just like, they can't be bothered to do the translation. It's like, oh yeah, just like if it's like a French, if it's like a French speaking, I'm like, oh, I'd love to know what they're
Yeah,
actually saying. Like, it just seems like lazy subtitling there.
yeah,
No, the thing was brilliant though. It's weird
mm,
because like I was really late onto that film. I'm a massive sci-fi fan. Like I love sci-fi
mm,
horror. I think it's one of my favorite genres. But I never sat down to watch the thing, and then I watched it. And I was
uh,
like, this still holds up incredibly
yeah,
because the
So
the real practical effects that they use, like it
yeah,
looks scarier than half the shit you see now, for sure.
yeah, it's amazing. But this guy who worked on those films, I can't remember his name now. He was very young. The guy who does all the practical effects for the movie. I think he was like around 18, 17, 18 at the time. The guy who did every practical effect for the movie, and it just, yeah, like you say, it holds up so well. It still looks amazing. But have you seen They Live by John Carpenter as well?
No, I haven't, but
That
I'll
that's
also put that on my watch list.
that's probably me and Siemens' favorite John Carpenter movie. Like the thing is kind of, it stands on its own. It's so good. But
Yeah.
like of all the other John Carpenter movies, They Live is fucking amazing, and that one is definitely like, we're very inspired by that movie when it comes to like our lyrics as well. So because it's basically this guy who, like, aliens have taken over the world, and if he puts on a certain sunglasses, he can see the real world. That's kind of,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's just
Okay.
amazing. And there's one of these wrestlers from the '80s who plays the main part, and he's amazing. So a must watch for sure.
Yeah. No, I'm always down for that.
Yeah.
Um, so what got you into heavier music then?
Just again, like going back to like growing up in Stavanger, it was the kind of heavy music we had back then in Stavanger was this band called Purified in Blood, which is more like a hardcore straight edge kind of band.
Mm,
And they were great, but my one of my best friends' older brother, a guy called Fedlik, who I've played in a band with in later years, it was kind of him just showing me everything, because he was a bit older, like maybe like, I think he's like 12 years older than me. And I definitely had like an interest of like more hard rock kind of music, and I think he kind of picked up on that, and he was like, "Well, let me show you this," and would like show me different music, and a lot of different guitarists as well. Because like growing up in early 2000s, it was definitely not like a lead guitar era of music in any way. Like it was
mm,
the solo guitar was kind of dead. But he was showing me all these different bands, and like, yeah, everything from, like, I remember him like giving me Metallica when I was like maybe 8 years old, and introducing me to all these different kind of things, and Slayer. And then little did I know that his whole agenda was that he was just going to make me play guitar so he could take me in his band when I got old enough, which is exactly what he did.
like an
So we
experiment,
actually,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah, and yeah, we released an album together about 6 years ago with a band called the Consortium, which is more like avant-garde black thrash. Um, but yeah, so it was him basically that introduced me to heavy music, because I wouldn't get it that much at home. Like my dad would listen more like Boston AC/DC kind of like
Yeah,
rock and hard rock music, but he definitely showed me like the heavier type of music, and it didn't take me very long. I think he knew what he was doing. He would show me the right bands. Like I would like everything that he showed me, and then from there it just kind of took off. And then a couple of years later, like YouTube would come, and then you could start searching for bands on YouTube, and then I would find a lot of stuff myself. And then you had the Headbangers Ball that I mentioned earlier as well, where I would just like actually see it for the first time. Like would see like all the style and like the kind of like the guitars that they would use, like a lot of Ironbirds and Flying Beasts and Explorers. And I was just hooked after that. Really, it was just it was done, and I've never looked back.
did he take a lot of credit then for getting you into it?
Yeah, I still I still he likes to mention it every now and then as well. Like, yeah,
I bet.
don't forget that I was the one who got you into heavy music. But yeah, but he did. So I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. It's kind of easy to say, but you probably feel the same. Even if someone showed you heavy music, you feel like at some point you would probably find it yourself. You don't know that for sure, but I feel like I was always destined to end up listening to heavier music. I feel like that was just like, it was always going to end up that way. But he'd got me into it a lot earlier than a lot of my friends did. For example, I was into like heavy music way before I was 10 years old. So, and like heavy
Yeah.
music as well. Like I remember he got me like, he would show me like Cannibal Corpse when I was like 10, 11, and it was just like, I didn't actually like it, but it was so extreme that it was still cool in a way, I guess. Weird.
Yeah, it's the intrigue. I think it's
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think I don't know if it's to do with like your environment, like, what you grew up with. I mean, my mum was always like, she liked rock music. So like that was always on in the car. And then like
Yeah.
I had like a friend and he's like, he's into like rock and roll his whole life. His families are all like, all in bands or play instruments. So, I think when he's surrounded by that, and I'd play like Guitar Hero,
Mm.
always a good gateway. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
we
get
actually
into it that
used to
way.
that's funny. Like talking about games like Guitar Hero. I remember like we would play Guitar Hero, but I would play the song on real guitar, and then my friend would play it on Guitar Hero. So like I would learn the song on real guitar, and then I would play along to him playing to Guitar Hero. That was kind of
Oh wow.
I just remember that now. Yeah, that
I
was
didn't
yeah.
know
Because
I didn't know if the tabs would carry across, so they actually work then. Like if you try it
no,
on a
no,
proper
like it
guitar.
would just be like I like if you were playing like Crazy Train or whatever, I would just play it on real guitar, and
Right.
he would play it on the whatever the controller is. And because like already by that point, like when Guitar Hero came out, I already played. I started playing guitar when I was like 6 or 7. So I already played for quite a while when that came out. But that was like a fun way for like because it was kind of like when Guitar Hero came out, like even though I don't know how I feel about it, it definitely kind of introduced a different generation to like heavy guitar as well. And like people that necessarily didn't love heavy music would still think that Guitar Hero was cool. And then
Yeah, that's true.
they thought it was really cool when if I could play the song like for real, like on an actual guitar. They thought that was pretty sick too. So all of a sudden, I was a cool guy who could actually play the song that they were playing on Guitar Hero.
Yeah, I think it had some good influence for sure. Because, like you said, there
Yeah,
was so many people that didn't listen to that music at all, but like, they'd play Guitar Hero and they'd know like Dragon Force Through the Fire and the Flame just because it was
yeah,
the hardest
yeah,
song to play or something.
yeah, yeah, sure.
It's
I
cool.
remember that one. Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
remember
that
the
was
first
something.
CD that you ever bought?
Uh, damn. I think I do. I don't want to say the first CD that I ever bought. I'll say the first heavy CD I ever bought.
No,
I don't want to
you
say.
can. I want to hear the other one as well.
Oh, that was the that was okay. I'm gonna have to say it now. It was I was like obsessed with this like this I'm Blue song. Have you ever heard that one? Like Eiffel 65? Yeah. I was so obsessed with it that I had to get it on a CD. So I bought that in 1999 or whatever that is. That was my first CD that I ever bought with my own money. Was that one?
Oh
Which
yeah.
yeah,
I used to like
well,
that
it
song when
was
I was younger. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I think it was it LimeWire or like, one of
yeah,
those like things that you download music on back in the day. Like,
yeah,
yeah, used to be on that for
mm,
sure.
yeah. But I remember I actually do remember the first like heavy album that I ever bought for my own money at least. Was Ride the Lightning by Metallica when I was on holiday with my family in Stockholm, Sweden, and uh, and I'd heard it. I think like yeah, again going back to like my best friend's older brother, he'd showed it to me because he had it on vinyl, and I was just like completely blown away by Fight Fire with Fire. So remember we were on holiday, and I had this like little Discman thing that I would like listen to all the time, and I'd have it in the car when we were driving. I was like, I have to find Ride the Lightning by Metallica, and then I found it, bought it with my own money, and that's definitely like the first heavy album I ever bought. And I would sit there with the lyrics, like the whole, like I wouldn't talk to anyone the whole car, and I would just sit and listen to it over and over again, just like learn the lyrics, even though I didn't know what the fuck it meant because I was Norwegian and my English wasn't great at the time. So, so yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's definitely so that still to me is like a very very special album, probably my favorite Metallica album actually. I think,
yeah, man. I think like nostalgic albums, like they'll always hit different just because they
yeah,
just remind you of that time, and like, first time you listen to it. I think even like no matter how many times you listen to the album, it's like it still captures that feeling for you. That a lot of
yeah.
albums can't do that for you, unfortunately, because it's just not part
Yeah,
of that.
that's one of the saddest things with getting older is that I can never get that feeling again ever like that feeling of discovering a new band when you're young or discovering an album for the first time when you're quite young, like the absolute like obsession you get with it, that's kind of gone now, which I think is kind of sad at times actually. It's kind of miss that feeling when you were just like completely obsessed over it because you had all the time in the world to obsess over this album, right? You don't have that when you're older. You have to go to work to take care of shit. Like you don't have time to obsess over an album the same way you did when you were 10 years old, right? So I kind of miss that feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Same with like movies as well. Like, I have like
Yeah.
favorite movies that, I rewatched like, the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy over the weekend. And I was just
Yeah.
like, it's just reminds you of that time. I'm like, nothing can capture the magic that, when you first watch this. But
Yeah.
saying that again, though, like, there's so much good music for metal right now. Like, in my
Mm.
opinion, it's the best time for metal. Like, there's so many good
It's
bands
a great
coming
time.
out.
Yeah.
Like, like I said, the year started, you guys dropped out of realities. I'm like, holy shit. It's already blew me away. Set the bar so high for the year. So it's great to know, like, everything's so accessible. You can listen to all this like great music. So I
Mm.
think it's a gift and a curse, but I do get what you mean about that nostalgic feeling for an album
Yeah.
covering
Yeah, for
something
sure.
amazing.
But you're 100% right. It's actually a great time to be into to extreme metal. It's so many good bands, and it's kind of scary how many good albums are dropping every week now.
I know.
It's crazy. I love. Did you hear the In Culture? Do you know In Culture from Norway, the thrash band?
I don't think so.
They,
Well, I'll check it
no,
out.
they've been around for a while. Amazing band. They dropped their latest album in December, and it's so good. Like if you get like they have this perfect mix of doing, especially like on the last album, they would do this everything you like about like old school Bay Area thrash metal, but again with this Norwegian twist. So it's not as dark as like as we are, but it just got like great riffs, great vocals, great compositions. It's so good.
Yeah,
And
I'll get on my radar, man.
yeah, you got to check them out. They're really good. And so I've kind of been I don't know, the last few years I've been kind of obsessing about this whole Norwegian scene. There's so many good bands from all over the place, but again, just want to kind of pull that to the forefront. How good the scene is in Norway nowadays. It's like a real pleasure to be a part of. Actually, it's so many good bands, there's so many good musicians, and the fun thing is that so many of us play in different bands. Like we play together in different bands, um, and uh, and it's just like a great scene. Like Oslo is a great place to play heavy metal nowadays, which is quite fun.
Yeah, man. Well, I've always said it like Norway is the capital for metal, you know what I mean? There's
Yeah,
good bands from all different types of metal, like across the
yeah, it
woodwork,
is.
always as well. I don't know what's in the water with you guys, but Jesus.
Man, it's the darkness. I'll tell you, it's the long dark days of the cold weather. So that's kind of does something to you.
So what do you get up to then when you're not in Sovereign, when you're not playing with bands? Like what do you get up to in your spare time, your hobbies and interests?
Yeah, well, I work. I run a microbrewery, so I'm
That's
very much
amazing.
into. Yeah, so I'm very much into to beer brewing
Where's the Sovereign beer,
and craft
dude?
beer. Well, it'll probably come. Well, we'll make one for the next album. We'll do a release of a new beer. So yeah, no, that's definitely an interest. I'm also like, so this is not very popular amongst a lot of metal fans, but I'm very into sports. Always been very a sports. I'm a massive sports fan. Played sports my whole life as well. So that's definitely something I get up to a lot. Um, and yeah, no, I guess that's it. That's all I have time for really. Work, microbrewing, sports, and heavy metal. That's kind of it. It's a
I mean,
good
that's
life,
that's
really.
more than most. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. I feel like if you did, what would you call your Sovereign beer if you were gonna brew it? I feel like you should call it like counter hops or something. That'd be
Yeah,
quite cool.
it would have to be something like that, like yeah, the Enigma of malts or something. I guess could be something like that. Yeah, because I'm very much into like my malty beers, like darker beers. That's kind of what I prefer. Very fan of like we actually brew a lot of English style ales. Like we do like I think probably the best beer we do nowadays is like an English style brown ale, which I'm very happy
Oh,
with.
nice.
We do a lot of that. We do like more classic brewing compared to we're not that big on like I don't know if you're like into like New England IPAs and stuff. Like we're not.
No, I like them.
I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm not that big on it. It's a bit too much for me. I like my classic ales more. And also the same thing. Like when I was living in the UK, I got very into like cask ales. I was obsessed with that when I was living there, which is like if you're not from the UK, it's most people from everywhere else in the world find cask ales to be maybe not exactly their style, but for me, it's amazing. Like I love a bitter, like old porter, all these kind of things. I was absolutely obsessed with that.
Yeah.
So
We're
we're
gonna
actually
say
working.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like porters at the moment, like dark beers
Yeah,
and
yeah,
porters and stouts and stuff. Like, depends on which
yeah,
one. Some of them are a little heavy, but like it's a nice sort of drink if you just like chilling, like watching a movie or just like,
yeah,
you know, I love them, mate. Yeah, super nice.
yeah,
It's really
yeah.
strong as fucking hell.
Yeah, that's great. That's the other fun part of it. Like it's it's usually quite strong, so that's fun. And I also do like I do a lot of production work. Kind of slowed down on it a bit the last few years. So like the only album I've produced in the last few years was our own album. So apart from that, I used to do a lot more, but it's kind of died down a bit. I kind of lost interest a little bit, but I'll definitely like mix the next album as well. I think that was a daunting thing to do, really. Like to mix your own stuff is I've never been a fan of doing that because it's you get too emotionally involved in the sound.
Yeah, that's I didn't think about that, but that's probably a big point,
Uh,
isn't it?
yeah, it took way too long for me to mix this album. It's yeah, way longer than it should have taken. But it's just this thing where you constantly. I don't know. It's scary because it's if I'm going to be quite honest, it's this whole thing where if it's all going to fall down to the production not being good enough, then you know it's 100% your own fault. Is that you can't blame it on anyone else? That's like, yeah, well, I fucked it up because I didn't mix it well enough.
Do you think there's
That
like
kind of
some
that.
sort of level of like being too self-critical if you mix it yourself as well? Like, you
Yeah,
can't like go over a certain bit as opposed to if you get some with a fresh eyes to look at it, like they'll tell you,
mm,
okay, okay, you're being too hard on yourself, you're like this sounds good or whatever. I
yeah.
mean, I don't know. I don't produce, but you know.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the thing, especially for me. Like, in Necromantheon and Obliteration. So in Necromantheon, I play with Arvid, which is one of the best guitarists in Norway, and he produces. He's always produced all his own stuff, and he mixed for a lot of other bands in Norway as well. And he's like so good at it, and I obviously had like talked to him about it and stuff. But he's so like he seems so confident in doing it. Whereas for me, that hadn't done it in a while before I did our own album, was like, all right, so this is going to be our debut album, and I haven't really mixed an album in probably like 2 years. Then I'm going to do this. Am I sure I want to do this? I'm definitely not sure, but then it's this whole thing about like the only one that really knows exactly what you want is yourself, right? So you can tell it,
True.
you can try to explain it to other people, but at the end of the day, the only one who really knows exactly what you want it to sound like is yourself. And if you feel like you're capable of doing it, then it's probably a good idea to do it. But I think for the next one, I'm probably not going to do it all on my own. I'm probably going to have someone else with me to kind of take a bit of the workload, because it's definitely, you can definitely get too drawn into it, and I spent way too much time. Like sometimes I would just have to leave it for 2 days, come back and be like, what the fuck am I doing? This sounds horrible. And then someone else would come and be like, no, it sounds good. I'm like, fuck you, it sounds like shit. And like it's that whole thing. But in the end, I'm not gonna lie, I've been quite like nervous about the reception for the production as well, because it's also like, again, going back to the whole thing where if that's what people don't like about it, then I fucked it up, right? But
I
done
haven't
all
heard
the
any
work prior
complaints.
to it. Yeah, no, that's been good. It's been a pleasant surprise, really. Which, because I told the other guys in the band that I'm never gonna do it again. But then I haven't heard any real complaints. I've heard some, but that's expected. It doesn't matter who produces it. Someone's going to complain about the sound. That's just the nature of it. But now I'm like, well, maybe I'll do the next one too. I don't know. We'll see. I probably will. But it's something. It's like it's a good thing because you're in complete control of your own sound. But it's also you could be the one that fucks up everything for everyone. So it's definitely like a balance to keep there. But we were lucky enough to there's this studio in Oslo that's kind of is becoming this kind of its own thing, really, where like the Darkstorm did their last 3 albums there, I think,
Oh, amazing.
and Necromantheon did their last album there, and then we did our album there. So it's kind of becoming this like studio now, where a lot of bands want to record their albums. It's kind of becoming its own thing, like the Norwegian version of Morrisound in Florida almost. hopefully it can be that. So yeah, so we had a lot of good engineering from Ole Øfsdal and Silje Høgevold, who works there. And Ole is just like a freak when it comes to guitar sound. Like he's got so many crazy, he's got so much crazy gear, and he's like obsessed with guitar sounds. So he did a lot of that, obviously, and he was a lot of cool gear. We would like blend like my 5153 with like an old Mesa Boogie Mark II C plus. We'll blend both those signals and then drive it through like this old Boss space chorus from like the early 70s. And that's kind of like, especially on, you hear it quite well on like Counter Tech when the riff goes on its own. Then you'll hear like this kind of floating chorus sound. That's kind of like the old chorus in between those two amps, which is just like a crazy sound. It's a very different guitar sound to a lot of the stuff you'll hear nowadays, which is also fun. So we did a lot of experimenting there. That was quite fun, and yeah, just an overall good experience, really. So probably going to do the next album there. Probably going to go for the same recipe that we did this time. It's probably going to be in that studio. I'm probably going to produce it, and then we'll see how that turns out.
Oh yeah, I was say, but I think speak for everyone when we say definitely ready for more. So yeah, love
Yeah,
to hear it, man.
we already got quite a lot of new material. Actually, it's I don't think it's gonna. Hopefully, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna promise anything at this point, but I don't think it's gonna take too long for album number 2 to be out. It's not gonna be like 5 years at least, maybe 2, 3. We'll see.
Yeah, can't wait, man. So I got one more question for you. Somewhere that we
Yeah,
always like to leave it. So if you were trapped in I was going to say zombie apocalypse, but I think it'd be more sovereign fit if we say you're trapped in an AI generated world of robots running around,
damn.
and you with your bandmates. Which member would you be least reliant on to survive, and which member would you be most reliant on to survive? And you can't pick
Uh,
yourself, can't bow out.
uh,
It's big.
so all right, so we're fighting off like AI generated fucking robots here, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
need someone to help me protect, to help protect me basically at this point. So I'm
yeah. And
oh god.
and you also got to say who you'd be least reliant on.
Yeah, well, I'll start with least reliant. Uh, uh, I think it would. He's gonna hate this. It will probably have to be Kato, the drummer, and I'll tell you why. It's because he would be too obsessed. He would obsess too much on how we're gonna beat them. He would spend too much time trying to figure out what we're gonna do, and he'll be too anxious about the whole thing actually happening. So he'll already be dead by that point because he's spending too much time thinking. That's his problem. And and I think probably Vidar, the other guitarist, would be the one I would be most reliant on because he's ice cold and he would just act, and he would be the last survivor in a fucking total zombie apocalypse or AI generated robot apocalypse. And yeah, I think yeah, I would definitely be most reliant on Vidar, least reliant on Kato. Sorry, Kato, but yeah, you think too much.
He'd be your ruthless leader then. He'll just make the hard actions that nobody else wants to do.
Yeah, well, that would be the Vid. That's because the thing is, Vidar is he would. I can imagine him in that sense, just being fucking ice cold and just taking care of business. He wouldn't think; he'll just do. So that's
Yeah.
he'll definitely. Simon would. I don't know. He'll probably make it somehow.
Yeah. It's a key thing to need for the apocalypse, I reckon.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, man.
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it's been great talking to you, by the way.
Yeah,
Obviously
you too,
I
man. It's great.
love that alter realize. I can't wait to keep spinning it. I've had it on since it's came out, and yeah, honestly, you've really hit the marker of that. So can't wait to see
Yeah,
what you guys
cheers,
do
man.
next for sure.
Yeah, appreciate it, and hopefully we're gonna make it over to England soon. We got some stuff in the works, so we'll see. I probably won't be too long. I think it's time.
Amazing. Yeah, no,
So
I
yeah,
can't wait
man.
for you
Thank
guys to
you.
launch it.
A great job on the podcast, and good luck to you guys, both of you. And it's great to be on here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
See you later, man.